6.5 years, and with no phone calls, no visits. They say his mama said she ain't seen them since like since they been in there.
New footage of YNW Melly inside Broward County Jail is blown up online, spreading like wildfire after nearly 2,500 days behind bars with no conviction to his name. This new clip, Eason T, just another viral moment tit, shaking the entire case and forcing people to question everything they thought they understood about this never-ending saga. What's happening in that footage and why it's resurfacing right now has everyone talking non-stop because it hits way deeper than a quick headline ever could. To really get what's unfolding today, gotta rewind back to the early morning of October 26, 2018, when this whole nightmare started. Picture it clearly. A gray Jeep Compass cutting through the dark. Florida streets carrying 4 members of the YNW Collective, a small crew of young rappers from Gifford, Florida.
On October 26th of 2018, this defendant shot and killed 2 of his friends. He killed Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams.
A place where hope feels rare and dreams cost more than people can afford. These were kids grinding for a SoundCloud breakthrough, chasing a come-up together, trying to build something real out of nothing but hunger and talent. Inside that Jeep were Jamel Morris Demons, YNW Melly himself, his close associate Cortland Henry, known as YNW Bortland, their longtime friends Anthony Williams, called YNW Sack Chaser, and Christopher Thomas Jr., known everywhere as YNW Juvie. These weren't just co-workers, they were brothers who grew up side by side, fought through the same struggles, and were just beginning to taste the success they spent their whole lives chasing. But by sunrise, everything changed in the worst way imaginable. 2 of them would never see another day again. Their bodies found filled with bullet wounds, their futures gone in an instant, and the music they dreamed of creating together silenced forever. And according to the prosecution's version of events, the betrayal behind those deaths wasn't just violent, it was unthinkable.
The car is traveling westbound on Memorial Parkway, then goes north on 172nd and shows up at the hospital. The drive-by is completely and utterly false. How can I tell you that, ladies? Well, the detectives from Miramar at this point shut down the entire length of Miramar Parkway from 160th to 172nd. And they sit and they walk side by side for an hour, that mile-long stretch, looking for evidence of this drive-by.
They claim that Melly, sitting in the rear driver's side seat, opened fire on his own close friends. The very people he had built this entire movement with. The same people he once called family. But the prosecutors say the darkest part didn't stop with the shooting. They allege that Melly and Bortland didn't call for help, didn't break down, didn't scream for anyone to save their wounded friends.
There is a lack of any evidence whatsoever to support that a drive-by happened on Miramar Parkway. What would they look for? Shell casings, glass fragments, projectiles, tire marks. You're going to hear that there is none of that found whatsoever.
Instead, they claim the 2 drove around with the bodies inside the SUV and staged the whole scene to look like a random drive-by, turning a horrific moment into something cold, calculated, and strategic. According to the state, they took that bullet-riddled Jeep to a lonely dead end near the Everglades, next to a recycling facility, where no lights glowed, no witnesses watched, and no one could see what really happened in the shadows. Bortland finally pulled up to Memorial Miramar Hospital at exactly 4:35 a.m.
The medical examiner's office is going to tell you is that when the drive-by was staged at 4:02 a.m., the victims were already dead. The medical examiner will be able to testify and tell you that the fatal shots to Anthony Williams, to his head, that enters in the back of his head and exits at the top, blowing out the front passenger window, was fatal. And that the additional wounds that are consistent with the trajectories going through the vehicle, he's already dead.
Delivering a dramatic story to officers about a random drive-by that supposedly hit their Jeep out of nowhere, he claimed the attack was sudden, unprovoked, and so violent that 2 of his closest friends didn't survive. But the investigators who heard this story weren't buying a single word of it, not even for a second.
This is where context matters. What does that mean? If you work at Google and you say, my whole floor is coding, that's a good thing. If you work at Broward General Hospital and you say, my whole floor is coding, that is a bad thing. The context around the messages matters.
Police immediately walked the entire stretch of Miramar Parkway where this so-called drive-by supposedly happened, moving, side by side for over an hour like they were sweeping for treasure, but they didn't find a single clue. Not one shell casing on the pavement, not one piece of shattered window glass. No bullet fragments stuck in walls or signs, not even skid marks from another car peeling off into the night. The whole place was spotless, way too clean for a story about a violent ambush. And when detectives pulled surveillance footage from the recording studio the crew had left that night, everything shifted.
Mr. Dimmons has been waiting in custody to see a trial on this case since, I believe, 2019. He obviously went to trial before that ended in a mistrial, and he's remained in custody since that. And he has a right to a speedy trial, a constitutional right to a speedy trial.
The footage didn't just poke holes in Bortland's drive-by tail, it ripped it apart. The video clearly showed for people in that Jeep when it pulled out of the lot, not too like he claimed. And even more damaging, Klled Demons was visibly seated in the rear driver's side spot, the exact position prosecutors say the gunshots came from. Then came the forensic breakdown, and that's when things got even darker.
If you wake up tomorrow or the next day and you decide you've changed your mind and you want to resolve this case, both cases, by way of a jury trial, that's not going to happen. If you want to have a trial, the trial starts tomorrow. If you want to accept the deal, you can accept the deal today. But there's not going to be any bias and remorse in the way.
Medical examiners concluded the fatal shots came from inside the Jeep, traveling from the rear driver's side toward the passenger side where the victims were seated. That alone was devastating, but it got worse. One victim had stippling on his body, tiny burns from unburnt gunpowder that only show up when shots are fired at extremely close range, just a few feet away.
Mr. Henry, I'm not quite sure how your lawyers managed to do this, but I wish you good luck.
That detail shook investigators because it suggested something far more personal and intentional than a random attack. The prosecution didn't stop there, they said. Melly basically admitted to the crime in the hours after the shooting. Right after the news spread online, someone messaged Melly on Instagram, asking if he was all right after hearing about the incident. And prosecutors claim he responded with 3 chilling words. Those words have been repeated in court as if they were a full confession. A digital whisper that turned into a courtroom weapon. But this is where the whole case gets twisted and way less cut and dry than the state wants the world to believe. Even with all this evidence, the forensics, the tracking data, the alleged confession, Melly's first trial in 2023 didn't end in a conviction.
Through this proffer agreement, of course, the prosecution wants him to cooperate, but there's no negative sanction for him if he does not. There's not a positive that he will receive if he provides certain information, and there's not a negative that he would receive if he doesn't cooperate or if he doesn't give any additional information. I think considering the possible lifestyle that he lives, and of course, we're in a no snitching environment, with certain demographics, that he probably will not say much, if anything, at all.
The jury deadlocked, and reports say 9 out of 12 jurors were leaning toward acquittal on the major charges. That's huge. That means despite everything the prosecution brought, most jurors still felt like the story wasn't solid enough to lock someone away for life. And so here he is stuck in a legal freeze that's dragged on for years. No conviction, no freedom, just endless delays, courtroom twists, and the weight of a case that refuses to reach a real ending.
There was a whole list of everything that would happen with the plea. What charges would get dropped, what he would get credit for, what would be a null process, which is it's getting taken away. Nothing in it said anything about cooperating. It was just him admitting to what he did, and he would get the 16 years, and that'd be it.
Melly stays caught in a limbo that feels like it might never break, while the world watches every new leak and every new clip, trying to guess what is really coming next. Right now.
Speaking of trials, YNW Bortland, he just took the plea for 10 years.
Good.
6 years probation.
Could they offer him 5 life sentences?
Yeah.
He been in there 5 years.
He's been in there 4.5.
And they know they done it.
But it's not a lot of evidence.
Melly has been sitting behind bars for more than 2,400 days, almost 7 long years without a single conviction to his name. 7 years of waiting, fighting, stalling, and hoping while the world keeps spinning around him. His retrial originally expected to begin in September 2025.
A total sweetheart deal. He was looking at multiple life sentences on the back end and essentially spending the rest of his life in prison. With this plea agreement, the plea, he pled no contest, I believe, to 2 counts, and the sentence promises 10 years. There are conversations between co-defendants, particularly people who are friends and people who have engaged or alleged to have engaged in certain conduct together. That's like, you're not going to snitch on me, I'm not going to snitch on you. At the end of the day, if that were to be the case, there's mutually assured destruction.
Was pushed all the way to January 2027 because of non-stop battles over what evidence the court will even allow. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get messier, September 2025 arrived, and everything flipped instantly. What happened next was the kind of twist nobody saw coming, no matter how deep into the case they were. On September 9th, 2025, lock that date in your mind, the entire hip-hop world froze. This was one day before YNW Bortland was supposed to start jury selection for his own murder trial.
Well, yeah, speaking of Florida, YNW Melly is delayed until 2027.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with Melly. I always still stand like you shouldn't be involved. Like, you shouldn't be involved. Your name shouldn't come up if you killing your homie. Like, it should never happen in the real.
A trial that could have cemented him in a cell for the rest of his natural life. But instead of gearing up for a courtroom war, he stepped into that Broward County courtroom and made a move that sent shockwaves through the culture and the entire legal system. To really understand how wild this moment was, you have to know what Bortland was facing before the deal dropped.
6.5 years, and with no phone calls, no visits. They say his mama said she ain't seen them since like since they been in there, damn near. She ain't seen him. She said she talked to him on the phone a couple of times, but they took all his phone privileges, so he in that down bad.
He was on T staring at just one life sentence. He was looking at multiple back-to-back life sentences stacked like bricks. Life, then life, then life, then life again, followed by an extra 75 years just to make sure he never touched daylight again. If the jury convicted him, he would have spent every remaining day of his existence behind prison walls with no second chances. But with one signature and a few words spoken into the record, that entire nightmare future vanished on the spot. The 2 first-degree murder charges, both tied to firearms, were completely dropped. Not reduced, not softened, erased, in exchange for giving up his right to a trial.
How are you today?
Not good.
Are you cold?
No, I'm just, I don't feel comfortable.
Are you nervous?
I feel threatened.
Bortland pleaded no contest to 2 counts of accessory after the fact to murder and 1 count of witness tampering. And instead of spending his life in Florida State Prison, he was sentenced to 10 years behind bars, followed by 6 years of supervised probation, with credit for the time he'd already done. That credit mattered in a major way.
Did you have an opportunity to read the statement you gave in 2018?
I read the statement.
Okay.
I don't remember anything from that statement, but I do remember my deposition from December 22.
So the deposition, that would have been 6 months ago?
Yeah.
He had already served around 4.5 years, which means he could realistically see release around 2032, a massive change from the possibility of dying behind the wire. It was a stunning and life-altering turnaround, the kind of courtroom shift that people talk about for decades because it feels almost unreal. Even the judge seemed caught off guard by how the agreement unfolded.
When you first took the stand, you said, "I feel threatened."
Yes, sir, I do.
Who do you feel threatened by?
Objection, Your Honor.
Christine Brandon, the prosecutor's office.
This prosecutor.
Yes, I do.
He addressed Bortland directly in open court, and the tone of his words made it crystal clear just how unusual this deal was. It wasn't normal, it wasn't expected, and it wasn't something anyone inside or outside the courtroom had predicted. This was a legal twist that cracked the entire case open in a new way. But here's where everything gets even more complicated and controversial in the eyes of the public.
Now we're getting into speedy trial waters. Melly has been sitting in jail for quite some time, for years at this point, on these charges. Within the United States and our constitutional framework, a person has the right to a speedy trial. So at what point does the rubber meet the road and the judge say, hey, you know, if this case isn't brought to trial by this date at this time, then I'm going to entertain a speedy trial motion to dismiss.
Hidden inside that plea deal was something called a proffer. This isn't just a casual conversation. It's a sworn interview where Bortland has to sit down with prosecutors and give them an official statement about what really happened on that October night in 2018. And the moment that detail became public, one burning question exploded across social media, news outlets, and the entire hip-hop scene. The moment the plea deal dropped, one question shook the entire internet as Bortland about to snitch on Melly.
I think that if they did it, they would have been found guilty a long time ago. I've never seen a case take this long.
Well, right, because Melly took it to court and it was a hung jury.
Right.
And they're retrying him.
Is he about to give up information that could lock away the same friend he rode with for years? The same person he once called family? That question started rolling through social media like a wildfire, and the speculation didn't stop for a single second. But Bortland's attorneys have been loud, firm, and crystal clear in every interview and public statement they've made.
It's important, and this is a homicide case, this is a high stakes case. You want to ensure that there is integrity in the prosecution of this case, because this family does deserve justice, and there isn't a person that deserves to be wrongfully convicted or in prison for something that they didn't do. So it's really important on both ends to ensure that this prosecution is done with integrity.
They insist there is no requirement for him to testify against Melly, and no expectation that he will help the prosecution seal Melly's fate. According to them, the proffer session he must complete is limited to a few simple questions about his own actions that night. Nothing more dramatic, nothing explosive, nothing aimed at taking down his co-defendant. At least that's what they say. Still, not everyone buys that explanation. The hip-hop community erupted into one of the biggest debates this case has ever sparked, with people clashing online about what this plea really means. Some immediately labeled Bortland a snitch before he ever stepped into the interview room, convinced he traded loyalty for freedom. Others argued something more grounded, that cutting a deal to avoid multiple life sentences doesn't automatically make someone a traitor, especially when the agreement doesn't require you to testify against your co-defendant. And then there were the voices that cut even deeper, commentators who claimed the plea deal itself was a sign of guilt. They insisted that nobody accepts a deal that massive unless they are hiding something or trying to get ahead of what the state might reveal next. Whether that's fair or not, it added a heavy layer of pressure to an already explosive situation. The prosecution, though, gave their own explanation. They claimed they didn't have enough evidence to prove Bortland was one of the shooters, meaning they could clearly show he played a role in the alleged cover-up afterward. But they couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he fired any of the fatal shots, in their eyes. Dropping the murder charges was a favorite, was simply acknowledging the limits of what they could prove in court. But then another theory started spreading, one that made the situation even more complicated. Some legal analysts began suggesting that Melly and Bortland may have communicated before the plea was finalized. If true, that would mean both men understood exactly what this deal meant before it ever hit the public eye. It raises questions nobody can fully answer yet, but the idea alone has people spinning wild theories about alliances, strategy, and the next move in this long-running legal war. Meanwhile, the impact on Melly's case has been immediate and chaotic. His lawyers filed motions to replace his entire defense team, calling the situation impossible to continue working through after Bortland's unexpected plea. And with the retrial now pushed all the way to January 2027, the delay hangs over everything like a storm cloud waiting to break. Florida's court system has thrown this case into a deep freeze, and Melly is left waiting, watching, and wondering what the next twist will be. Through every twist in the courtroom and every wave of online speculation, Melly remains exactly where he has been for almost 7 long years, locked inside Broward County Jail, living the same routine day after day, while the trial date keeps drifting further into the unknown future. He's stuck in a holding pattern with no finish line in sight, forced to wait while the legal system keeps shifting the goalposts again and again. Which brings us straight to the viral footage that exploded online and has everyone talking right now. After nearly 2,500 straight days behind bars with no conviction, reports claim Melly has been held under extremely harsh, restrictive conditions. According to emotional statements from his mother, Jamie Demonsking, her son has endured long stretches of 24-hour lockdown, been stripped of the phone access he needs to talk to his loved ones, and hasn't been allowed visits from family members who desperately want to see him. The picture she paints is of someone isolated, frustrated, and cut off from the outside world in every way imaginable. This is the same young man who, at the height of his career, was collaborating with Kanye West and watching his music dominate streaming platforms everywhere. His songs were pulling hundreds of millions of plays, and critics called him one of the most unique voices in melodic rap. He had the kind of momentum most artists dream about, and then everything stopped overnight. Seeing him now in these conditions hits even harder because of how fast his rise was, and how quickly his world collapsed. His breakthrough track, Murder on My Mind, released months before the alleged killings, had already gone viral and earned massive attention. Its dark, emotional storytelling about accidental violence felt haunting enough at the time, but after the accusations surfaced, the lyrics took on a chilling new meaning. The public couldn't ignore the eerie connection, and it became one of the most controversial songs in hip-hop history. Still, the case against Melly has always leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence rather than solid, undeniable proof. Yes, prosecutors have cell phone data placing him at the scene during the crucial window of time. Yes, the forensic reports suggest the fatal shots came from inside the Jeep instead of from a drive-by attack. And yes, there's the alleged Instagram message the state claims was essentially a confession. All of that sounds strong, but it's not the whole story, because what's missing from the prosecution's case is just as important. No murder weapon has ever been found, not in the canals, not in apartments, not in storage units, nowhere. No gunpowder residue tested positive on Melly's hands or clothing. And maybe the biggest gap of all, no eyewitness ever stepped forward saying they saw him pull the trigger. That kind of hole raises serious questions about whether the evidence truly clears the threshold for guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Then came the highly controversial testimony of Felicia Holmes, the mother of Melly's ex-girlfriend, Mariah Hamilton. She was brought in reluctantly to testify about a phone call she allegedly overheard on the morning of the shootings. The moment she took the stand, the energy in the courtroom shifted. At one point, she used one powerful word, threatened, and that single word set the tone for one of the most heated exchanges of the entire trial. Holmes looked uncomfortable from the moment she sat down. She repeatedly told prosecutors she couldn't remember key details from the statement she gave investigators back in 2018. The state pushed her hard, trying to get her to confirm specifics about that early morning FaceTime call where she supposedly saw Melly on the screen talking about a shooting with her daughter. The tension grew with every question. But then Holmes pushed back hard. She revealed what she said was the real reason behind her unease. She claimed she had been pressured during the original investigation and forced into saying things she couldn't confidently stand behind today. That revelation hit the courtroom like a shockwave because it flipped the entire tone of her testimony on its head. Whether you believe Felicia Holmes was genuinely shaken by real fear of the state, or whether you think she simply didn't want to give testimony that could damage Melly forever, one thing stands out loud and clear. The case against Melly is anything but simple. Nothing about this situation is clean, easy, or guaranteed. And that's exactly why the new jail footage hit the public so hard. People aren't just reacting to the clip, they're reacting to the years of uncertainty hanging over this entire case. This is a young man who was only 19 when he was first arrested, a legal adult on paper. But still, at the very start of his life and career, and now he has spent most of his 20s locked away, watching years slip by while he waits for a trial date that keeps getting pushed further and further into the distance. That reality alone struck a nerve, because it highlights a deeper problem people don't want to admit. You can lose your whole life before a jury ever says you're guilty or innocent. The questions this footage raises go way beyond curiosity about a famous defendant. They hit at the core of how the justice system treats people who haven't been convicted of anything yet. How long can someone sit behind bars awaiting trial before it crosses the line and violates their right to due process? When does pretrial detention stop being holding time and start becoming punishment without a conviction? These aren't small questions, they're the kind that shake the foundation of the entire system. Then came October 2025, when an appeals court ruled to suppress broad digital evidence in the case, allowing prosecutors to only use communications from the day of and immediately after the incident. This was seen as a major win for the defense because it removed a huge amount of the state's digital material, potentially weakening their ability to argue premeditation or motive. It was a legal shift that instantly changed how both sides had to prepare, and it didn't stop there. In November 2025, the witness tampering charges against Melly were dropped completely. These charges, filed back in October 2023, were extremely serious. Prosecutors claimed Melly had used his time in jail to pressure people who might testify against him. But due to problems with the evidence, the state couldn't confidently move forward, so the charges were dismissed. For Melly's defense team, this was another major relief. Still, prosecutors remain firm and insist their core case is strong. They point to the cell phone tracking data, the forensic bullet trajectory analysis, and the alleged confession as pillars of their argument. In their view, these pieces form a powerful narrative about what happened inside that Jeep. and they argued that the families of Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr., two young men, whose lives ended in violence, deserve justice, no matter how long the process takes. To the state, the path may be long, the delays may be endless, but the outcome must be reached. To Melly's supporters, the delays and fractured evidence show something deeper, a system unsure of its own case. And somewhere in the middle sits Melly, waiting for the moment when the truth, whatever it is, finally has to be proven. But the defense looks at this entire situation through a completely different lens. They study the exact same evidence the state calls airtanned instead. They see cracks everywhere. They see missing pieces, broken assumptions, and gaps big enough for reasonable doubt to walk right through. And let's not forget, a jury already saw those same weaknesses during Melly's first trial and still couldn't agree on a guilty verdict. Because yes, Melly took it to trial, and it ended in a hung jury, which is rare in a case this serious. 9 jurors reportedly leaned toward not guilty on the top charges, and that alone shows how divided the room was. And now we wait for January 2027, when Melly will stand in front of a new jury, 12 strangers, who will decide whether he walks free or spends the rest of his life behind bars. One decision, one verdict, one moment that could change everything. We wait to see whether anything comes out of Bortland's proffer session with Prosecutor Ziff. He adds clarity, confusion, or nothing at all. We wait to see if more evidence gets thrown out by the courts, or if new evidence suddenly appears that shifts the balance toward one side. The entire case sits on a knife's edge, and no one knows which way it will fall. And through all this waiting, that footage of YNW Melly keeps spreading across social media like a digital warning siren. It reminds everyone that behind the headlines, behind the debates, behind the courtroom drama, there is a real human being spending years of his life in a cramped jail cell with no conviction to his name. It also reminds us of the 2 young men, Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr., whose families still live with unbearable grief every single day, hoping the truth finds its way to the surface. This story isn't just about a rapper or a criminal case. It's about time, truth, pain, and a justice system that moves slower than anyone can imagine. It's about lives changed forever, futures erased, and a trial the world refuses to stop watching. Whatever the final verdict becomes, one chapter will close, but the ripple effects will be felt for years. If you want to dive deeper into stories like this, explore another video right now, because the truth behind these cases is always bigger, darker, and more complicated than it first appears.